everybody. It's your friendly digital technology librarian, Christy here. We've reached another Friday, so of course I have another Film Rec Friday ready for everybody out there. This week we're looking forward to the new year, and with new year comes a desire for a fresh start or an interest in making some big changes. The movies that I picked out for this week have to do with either pivotal scenes having to do with the new year, where someone makes a big decision or a big discovery, or they have to do with characters who are in fact starting over, doing their own major fresh starts, as you will. So anyway, these films have all kinds of different genres. I have some that are really light and fluffy and some that are really quite serious and pretty intense. So I hope that one of these films will appeal to you at the very least, and if they don't, make sure you check out our video services. They are CleveNet's Overdrive, Hoopla Digital, and Canopy. All of the films available are available totally for free with the use of your Milan-Berlin library card. And, they really do have countless options out there. Whether you are a fan of comedy, musicals, horror, there's going to be something that you'll find really interesting. And again, it's totally for free with the use of your Milan-Berlin library card. So in any case, onward with all of the recommendations. So to kick things off this week, I have a selection from CleveNet's Overdrive, and this film is the one I was talking about when I said I had a really heavy pick for us. This is the film Fruitvale Station, and it was made in 2013. Now, Fruitvale Station is a rough watch. Brilliantly acted, really, really well put together, but definitely the story is a hard one for people to watch. It follows the true story of a young man named Oscar Grant. He was a 20-year-old in the Bay Area. It was New Year's Eve 2008, and he was a young man with plans. He had already made known his resolutions for the next year. He wanted to be a better son, a better partner to a girlfriend. He wanted to be a better father to his very, very young daughter. Just in general, he was working towards being a better man, and then there was an altercation at the Fruitvale BART station with the police authorities, and tragically resulted in Oscar Grant's death. That's not a spoiler. Like I said, this really happened. You know that that's where the film is going. And that's why it's such a hard watch. I mean, the way the pacing unfolds, it's one of those films that I think really puts you in the situation of everyone involved. And I think that's why it's so harrowing while you're watching it, because you know exactly where the situation ends up. And you keep feeling like, you were that sense of dread, and it would not be so affecting if it didn't have such brilliant acting from everyone. Like, all of the cast members in this are amazing. Michael B. Jordan is the young man who plays Oscar Grant, and he does such a nuanced performance with this kid who is definitely, he has had troubles. He's had difficulties in his life, but you still feel that intention of hoping that he'll be better, and of desiring to be better. And that's really what grabs you so quickly, and his relationships with the people around him, with his friends and his family. And you also, get to see how people perceive him as well. And I think that's very much another really important layer to the story. So if you are interested in biopics, if you like film about social situations and social change, if you are interested in films that do, tackle really difficult, awful situations, this is one of those films that I think people should see in general. I mean, it's just really, really well done. It tells a very important story, and um, overall, just the production and everything is just, it's just an excellent, excellent film. So I hope you'll check out Fruitvale Station, which is available on CleveNet's Overdrive. Okay, moving on to what I think is a significantly lighter second pick, and this one is available on Hoopla Digital, and it is for the movie Mermaids, which was made in 1990. Now, I actually recall all of the promotional materials for this film. I was probably around 8 at the time, but I still recall seeing Cher in this fabulous, like, Mylari styled costume dress, where she was clearly pretending to be a mermaid, but at the same time just thinking this person is really, really awesome, and then having no interest in watching the movie whatsoever because, again, I was 8. But fast forward a couple of decades, and I decided to watch this film just because I saw it pop up on Hoopla, and I really had a good time with it. It's definitely not what I thought it was going to be. So anyway, Mermaids is a 1960s period piece, very early 60s, and we're following this young 15-year-old girl named Charlotte Flax, who is played by the fantastic Winona Ryder. Charlotte is an interesting young woman. She's the polar opposite of her mother, who's played by Cher, who is wacky and outgoing, and she's always on the go, on the move, making not always the best adult decisions. But she knows who she is, she loves who she is, and she just goes with the flow. Charlotte is not that. Kind of neurotic, very closed, very much always trying to be the opposite of what her mother is. So much so that the Jewish raised Charlotte wants to be a Catholic nun. Not because she wants to be Catholic, just because she likes the whole, I guess, romance of the idea of being a Catholic nun. It's definitely an odd quirk for the character, but it makes sense in the storyline. I mean, she just essentially is wanting to rebel against this outgoing, crazy, wacky mom, and the only way to really outdo that kind of behavior is to, like, pull it way back. And that's what she does. So she's got all of this weird nun paraphernalia in her room. Like, she is just she's just a trip. But for whatever reason, she's still relatable at the same time. Even if you're drawn to her mother's character, which I definitely was, I liked that sort of life of the party character in this film, you still feel for Charlotte when she definitely is hating everything and every moment of her life due to that mom. In addition to Charlotte's relationship with her mother, you have Charlotte's relationship with her younger sister, Kate. She's only 9, and she's played by a ridiculously adorable Christina Ricci, who somehow manages not to be unbelievably irritating in a role that very easily could be. And it's rather pivotal that the character not be irritating as well, so she does an amazing job. I oftentimes find this particular type of small child character in these films to be hard to deal with on screen. Like, I get very tired of them very quickly, and oftentimes will find myself fast forwarding through those scenes. But no, like, you really genuinely like Kate. She's odd and quirky in her own little way, but it really is super adorable. She's infinitely more watchable than a lot of other young child actors. And the relationship and the connection between these three, even though all three women are leagues apart as far as personalities go, you still see the commonalities, you still see the things that make them a family. And it's really very, it's it's very sentimental in a way. Like it makes you really feel for them, like the times that they go through difficulties, it's all the acting. I mean, all three women do such a phenomenal job in their roles. um Cher is always a little bit over the top in movies for me, but it 100% works in this particular role. Like, she's supposed to be too big of a personality. Like, it wouldn't work if she pulled back at all. It absolutely would not be an effective character. Um, Charlotte Flax, as played by Winona Ryder, is sort of like this awkward, uncomfortable human being, and you definitely get there with Ryder's acting, and Ricci's take on Kate is again just so cute, and it's that interplay, all of that mixing together. And there are other people in their lives, like there's an incredibly like appealing role played by Bob Hoskins, who the late great actor, who ends up connecting with Cher's character. There are several other characters that are quite pivotal, but I don't want to give away quite yet. But um, overall, this movie it really is about those three women and their connection, and that's what makes it such a solid film. Like, it's a character driven story, not necessarily a plot driven story, though there are some really interesting plot points, like really interesting. And of course, the big scene of um that sort of drives the film into its climax is takes place on New Year's Eve. There's a situation that sort of causes one of the other characters to make some really questionable decisions in reaction to it. So I definitely think that if you like movies that are character driven, if you like films about women who are on their own doing their own thing, if you like strong female characters, if you like period pieces, because everything about this as far as period piece goes is amazing. Like, I even as a kid I noticed those costumes, and as an adult I love like the little cardigans, and it's just an incredibly well costumed show, like incredibly well costumed. um and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun. Some serious moments, but overall it's a sweet movie. So again, please do check out Mermaids. It's available on Hoopla Digital. Okay, my next recommendation is for all the musical theater fans out there. It is available on Hoopla Digital and is the film Rent, which came out in 2005. Now, Rent is the screen adaptation of the stage musical by Jonathan Larson, and for me, I really enjoy this movie. I think that it's an excellent adaptation of the show, which takes place in the very early 90s, in the Alphabet City region of New York City at the time, and it deals with this young group of New Yorkers who are all heavily, heavily affected by the then current AIDS epidemic, um, and all of the struggles that went with that at the time. You have a ton of characters in this film, but they all really are pivotal. They all are really necessary to tell this story. You've got Mark, who is an aspiring filmmaker. You have Roger, who is a struggling musician who is HIV positive, and dealing with the difficulties of that. You've got Mimi, who is a dancer. You've got Tom Collins, who is a professor who ends up falling in love with a character named Angel, who happens to save his life. And all of their lives are touched by HIV and AIDS, and we see how reaction to that at the time is so different from reaction to that today, but also in some ways very similar. It really is fascinating to think about. And it's a musical, right? So what about the music? The music is gorgeous and the performances are amazing. Jesse L. Martin in particular, who plays the Professor Tom Collins, sings a song called "I'll Cover You" that is a killer. The reprise of this song in particular is just a killer. He's an amazing, amazing performer. He's been in quite a few Broadway productions. And he's just always incredible. Adam Pascal plays Roger, the musician. He's a huge name at in theater. Anthony Rapp plays Mark, the filmmaker. You've got Idina Menzel playing another character out there, Maureen, who is a performance artist. She's over the top and like huge personality and very much on. And Menzel plays that to a T. Uh, all of the voices are so different, but somehow manage to blend really well. So if music is your thing, it's an interesting sort of sound when they're singing all together. And I love that. I think that whole concept of having very different kinds of voices is integral to the storyline. I mean, because we're talking about a community that was so many different people that had many, many, many different voices. Obviously, some of them are not going to sound like that perfect traditional standard Broadway tone. And I love that um they cast both the original musical and this movie in such a way that would portray portray all of those differences. Um, Several of the people in the film cast are also part of the original Broadway cast, but you do have different additions. Rosario Dawson plays Mimi. I think she was one of those casting choices that got the most pushback from fans. Uh, but she does a perfectly serviceable job in the role of Mimi, the dancer. Now, Mimi has never been my personal favorite character in the story, so having someone unfamiliar play the character wasn't a make or break deal for me. So take that as you will. If you were a huge fan of the musical and you did only love one particular sound and style for that character, okay, I understand where you're coming from. But I really, really don't think that she does anything in that role that doesn't make sense with the character. And I think she has a perfectly decent voice for that role. Um, Menzel, who is, of course, now quite famous for being Elsa in Frozen, plays a very different character as Maureen in this. And, you know, that's always one of those sort of meta entertainment things when you're familiar with her person's work, say from a children's series, and then they go on to play a character that's absolutely not that, which Maureen is absolutely not that. But she still shows off incredible range. There are a couple songs that she sings that are just bravura performances. She was the original Maureen in the Broadway production as well, so no shifts or complaints there for the most part, I would say. And some of the other characters and actors, they made small changes, but I think they're really beautifully done. I think the actor who is cast as Angel does an exceptional job. And for me, that was going to be one of the most challenging pieces of casting, and I think they did a phenomenal job there. So, the film itself deals with, like I mentioned, the AIDS epidemic, but it's really about the connection and relationship between all of these people, their desire to keep moving forward despite what was, especially at that time, dealing with a disease that was quite quite devastating. Um, so having that desire to keep moving forward, to keep pushing through difficulties, always looking for change, always looking for a fresh start. I just thought that was incredibly appropriate for this particular theme. And I just, again, think that it's a really solid pick for a movie. So if you are a fan of musicals, this show has incredible music. If you like solid acting, this has really really solid acting. If you are just a fan of films that are well done and recent historical period pieces, this one again, excellent, excellent choice. Okay, my next pick is available on Hoopla Digital, and it is for the film Ramen Girl, which was made in 2009 and stars the amazing and sadly late actress Brittany Murphy. Now, Ramen Girl is not a movie about New Year's Eve, but is a movie about fresh starts. And there's something about this movie. I watched it when it first came out, and I wasn't a particularly big Brittany Murphy fan at the time, but I just absolutely adored her in this. And I just really, really loved the movie and wanted to talk about it today. In Ramen Girl, you have a young woman named Abby who, through a lot of really unfortunate circumstances, ends up abandoned by her boyfriend in Tokyo with no friends, family, source of income, nothing. She's just on her own, adrift in a foreign country with the language she doesn't speak, with a culture she's not at all familiar with. She's just this sad, lonely American who wanders around. And seeing her panic and her sadness and her fear, like she catches you in it right away. It's there are lots of moments in the early part of the film that are played for laughs, but that are actually quite tragic. And she just does a really solid job of portraying that sort of crumbling and lost nature. She just does a phenomenal job at that. Anyway, she ends up at this little family ramen shop, and somehow the devotion of the chef to his craft, the feelings of these proprietors come across to her, despite the fact, again, that she is completely unfamiliar with the language, but she falls in love with everything that she gets from this bowl of ramen that she orders, this bowl of noodles. She ends up finding that feeling of comfort so much within this one experience that it causes her to have an epiphany. This is what she wants to do. She wants to make other people feel this sense of content and comfort just like she did. She wants to be able to give people that. And so she decides that she is going to learn how to be a ramen chef. She ends up going back to this little family run ramen shop and asking as best she can to be the assistant to this chef so that she can learn. By the way, she has no background in this whatsoever. And the ramen chef is just absolutely flabbergasted as to what this random foreigner is doing in his shop, essentially asking to be made a part of his family. Like, what? That makes no sense. The chef in question is actually played by a very, very famous Japanese actor named Toshiyuki Nishida. Nishida actually has won a couple of Japanese Academy Awards. So he's like not an unknown person in Japan. But I think this is probably one of his only English language films. I think I'm when I was looking into it, I couldn't see too many other movies that seemed at all Western. But yeah, I love that this huge actor in Japan is just this like random little old ramen chef torturing Brittany Murphy in Ramen Girl. I really liked that on a meta level. Anyway, she manages to convince this chef to take her on, and he treats her terribly at first. In large part to convince her to find something else to do. Like he wants to scare her away. So he essentially makes her clean the windows and the floors, the bathrooms, like just to do all the scut work, which in hierarchical tradition as an apprentice you would have to do anyway. I mean, he's not being unfair in that regard. You always start at the bottom rung there with this kind of small shop environment. But he definitely is doing it with the intent of like her not wanting to come back. And there's some funny stuff that goes down. I mean, like it's very very it's very very funny in a lot of parts, and that come from the cultural difference and just it. She just plays it very very well, as does Nishida. Anyway, you know, not surprisingly, as time goes on, they do form more of a rapport, though he never loses his grumpy outer shell. Like he's always grumpy. That's who this chef is. Um, but as time goes on, they become closer. Um, she also starts to really familiarize herself with Tokyo. She becomes friends with some people. She goes out on occasion. She eventually meets a young man that she hits it off with really, really well and develops a relationship with him. So it's really about Abby sort of coming into her own in a place that is completely foreign to her. She manages to bloom, and it's really really wonderful. I love that aspect of the story, that you don't need to be in the same place. You don't need to have all of these familiar things around you. You can shine in the most difficult and arduous of situations, and she absolutely does. And again, Murphy does such a great job with this particular kind of character. I mean, it's definitely a bit of a little girl lost situation, but Murphy plays it so well that I am never or almost never irritated by the character. There are moments when you're supposed to be irritated with her where you absolutely do. But again, you definitely need to be irritated with the character and some of the choices she makes at certain points, because that's the whole nature of this particular girl. Um, anyway, she, wants to make ramen her own. So she's always into like developing that traditional flavor, but expanding things into her own taste. And in the ramen community, that's not really done, especially not East Asian ramen community. So there's some friction about that. And it's interesting to see how that becomes sort of a crossroads for this character. And the way that they play that is very very interesting. So if you like movies about strong female characters, or at least women who grow into their strength, if you like stories about food, like if you're a foodie, this is a great film, because there's so many moments where you're like, oh, I just want a bowl of soup so badly. um, if you like fish out of water tales, God, is she a fish out of water in this. If you like light romance, I mean, there are just so many really fun things about this movie, and I honestly think almost anyone who likes a lighter movie will enjoy this one. So please please do consider checking out Ramen Girl, available as always for free on our Hoopla digital service. Okay, final recommendation for this week, available on Canopy. This is for one of my favorite movies of all time. I think I may have mentioned it before, but I couldn't not mention it when the theme is both New Year's Eve and fresh starts. And that is for the film The Apartment, which was filmed in 1960. I love this movie. I love the fact that it's hilarious but incredibly heavy in parts. It's got a dark sense of humor. It's got like some pretty seriously awful characters in it that you just absolutely despise, but also some characters that you absolutely adore. I I just have always loved this film, and I just find it so interesting how complex a lot of the characters are, and would definitely recommend it for anyone who likes classic film at all. So, in The Apartment, we follow an insurance worker who's pretty low on the totem pole at first, whose name is Cece Baxter, and he's played by the incomparable Jack Lemmon. Um, he starts to climb the ladder, but he does so not necessarily by his work, which is not bad. I mean, he's an excellent, excellent agent. But what's actually driving his career is the fact that he lends his key to these unscrupulous bosses so that these bosses can use his apartment to carry on with their extramarital affairs. That is horrible. I should absolutely hate CC Baxter for like being this middleman. I don't know. It's just such a weird situation. And hopefully not particularly believable, but absolutely works within the universe that this movie makes. Um, and these bosses are terrible. They're played for laughs, which adds another kind of awful layer to it, but it really, really does work. And like the fact that their swagger about this whole situation is so like nonchalant. They're just like, whatever, I need the key, and there's no shame whatsoever. And that's one of those things that makes this movie work so well for the time period, for the kind of business and industry and everything. It just feels like it feels almost too organic in a lot of ways. You hope that it's not. As someone who was not around at that time period or amongst this industry, I would certainly hope that that's not how it is. But oh, you just definitely have, it just has that vibe. Um, anyway, eventually, all of these middle management bosses start to get upset with Baxter because someone even higher up starts to use the key. And come to find out, like, the big boss is the one that is now wanting to monopolize the apartment. Um, Baxter ends up, however, kind of getting burned by that situation because he discovers that the big boss, Mr. Sheldrake, has a mistress who happens to be the young woman that he's been absolutely crazy about for years and years and years. Fran Kubelik, played by Shirley MacLaine, who is always just absolutely wonderful. And it's devastating to him. Now, Fran is an elevator girl in the company's a building. She's feisty, she's smart, she's savvy. She just happened to fall in love with this awful dude who's already married. And, you know, she likes Baxter. He's a nice guy, but she's really honestly in love with Sheldrake. So there's this weird love triangle going on, and a situation unfolds where Baxter ends up having to care for Kubelik, even though like he's hurting from the discovery that this happens to be the mistress of this his boss. And it's through this time where he's caring for her that they both sort of learn who they each really truly are, rather than just this couple of people who have this fun, light, fluffy flirtation in the elevator every day. I mean, that's really honestly been the entirety of their knowledge of one another for a couple of years. And so the awful situation is really what starts to cause this relationship to blossom. And, you know, Shirley MacLaine's character Fran is so many different things, and she's played so well all of these different layers. You know, she is young and she is clearly impressionable, but she also knows, you know, what she's worth. She knows she shouldn't have to be with this guy who is already married, but she loves him, and so she makes all these terrible decisions. But she's still likable. That's the thing. Like, you absolutely feel for her. You maybe don't agree with the choices she makes, but you 100% understand where she's coming from. And you know, I think a character like that can easily be played like a wet blanket, and she never does that. So if you like really solid acting, I think you should 100% check out The Apartment. It's just like the quintessential 1960s movie. The filming is beautiful. The direction is brilliant. All of the acting, whether it's Jack Lemmon, Shirley MacLaine, Fred McMurray, you know, there's so many people in this cast. You'll find familiar faces if you watch classic film. And I just really like it. It's really heavy in spots, but laugh out loud funny in others. It just works. And I think a New Year movie in particular, this one's at the top of my list. So please, if you get the chance, check out The Apartment. It's available on Canopy. You won't be sorry. Okay, so that is it for my recommendations of this week. This will actually be the last Film Rec Friday of the year. We'll be back starting in the new year. I'm super excited. I already have plans for January, so I hope you will tune in for those. It's going to be a fun one. In the meantime, if you have any New Year films or films about fresh starts, please comment below. I love film recommendations. I almost always check out movies that people will mention to me, even if I think, I don't know. I usually do check them out because I totally am obsessed with the idea of expanding my collection of things that I've viewed. If you have any recommendations for topics or themes that you'd like us to look at in the future, please comment with those below as well. Now, as always, thank you, thank you, thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And I hope that we see you in the next year. It's going to be a fantastic one. And with that, I'm going to sign off. Again, thank you so much. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.